In today's video, I'm going to be comparing the 3 entry denial operators on defense to see who's better objectively in every single scenario. With that out of the way, let's get straight into the video. So first of all, who are the 3 entry denial operators and what does entry denial even mean? Entry denial is essentially denying entry from the attacking team to the defensive team by using utility to make it to where they can't just walk in. So great example, the 3 examples that I'm going to go over today are Smoke, Goyo, and Tachanka. Smoke has gas grenades that deny people from being able to sit in an area without dying. Goyo and Tachanka have fire that make it to where people can't walk in, and if they do, they die. That is entry denial in a nutshell. A nitro cell or any type of defensive grenade is another example of entry denial, so you kind of understand where I'm going with this. Now, in terms of the 3 operators, who's better? Well, in order to answer that question, I need to break down each operator to give you a better understanding of what they're meant to do and how they complement each other. Now, the first operator I'm going to go over is Smoke. He is the tried and true, one of the best anchors in the entire game. When you think entry denial or you think anchor in general, you probably think Smoke. He is one of the oldest operators in the game, and he's very effective at what he does. Now, if we look at the actual area denied by his smoke grenade, how much space the actual smoke takes up, he's second place in area denial. Tachanka being last, Smoke being second, and Goyo being first. So in terms of actual area denied, he's not the best, but because it's a gaseous grenade and it's not fire that's easily seeable, you can get away with a lot more things in terms of the actual area denial, because a smoke is always going to be a little bit finicky in terms of what's choking the enemy and what's not choking the enemy. There's some times where I feel like I'm in a smoke and I should be getting choked and I'm not, compared to when I'm out of the smoke and I feel like I should not be breathing in smoke, but I am. So in terms of like actually its effectiveness and its radius, I feel like it's a bit more flexible compared to fire, but it's still not the best because Goyo is. But one thing that Smoke does have on the other 2 operators is it blocks vision because it's smoke. Albeit it doesn't block a lot of vision and most vision like most smoke grenades do, but it does block some vision. So on a surface level, if you don't want to use these smoke grenades as a way to kill people or hurt people or to deny an entry, you can use them as just a way to block lines of sight, which is always really, really useful. And that's something that Goyo and Tachanka can't say for themselves. One thing that's unique about Smoke as well is you throw his gadget. With Tachanka, it's not like that. He has a launcher, and Tachanka bounces his gadget, which means it doesn't stick to wherever you throw it to like Smoke does. So Smoke is very easy to use in terms of just his gadget. But the trade-off with that is that his loadout is not at all easy to use. He has a shotgun, which you have to be semi-good at positioning to be able to use effectively, and then he has an SMG-11, which is a pretty hard SMG to newer players or people that are on console, but once you get it down, it's not too bad. Still, it's an SMG with only 1-time scopes, so it's going to be not great for every single gunfight, and in terms of actually taking gunfights with Smoke, you're very limited on the range. You have to take it close range, which he has a deployable shield for, so that's not too terribly bad, and if you run the FMG, which you shouldn't be doing, but if you do, then that's not an issue. Now, if we talk about the actual range of the throw and how much you can throw it, he has a medium to long range throw, right? Compared to Goyo, to where you can't throw it and you have to pre-place it, it's pretty good, but compared to Tachanka, who can launch these things across the entire map, it's not that long of a throw. It's kind of like a perfect middle. As you can see, the pattern of Smoke is that he's kind of a perfect middle between Tachanka and Goyo, and that is not an exception when it comes to his throw as well. Now, one thing that Smoke doesn't have that Goyo does have is the fact that you have to equip his gadget and throw it, meaning that your gun isn't in your hand if somebody decides to swing you when you throw your smoke grenade. With Goyo, his stuff's already placed down, and all you have to do is have your gun up and shoot it, but you constantly have your gun up, which is pretty cool. With Smoke, you don't really have that advantage. So not only do you need to play it safe and play behind your deployable shield and play very reserved because of your limiting gun range, but also because you have to throw your grenades. So it's a little bit more dangerous to play Smoke than it would be to play Goyo, but that doesn't at all mean that he's a worse operator. And then if we actually talk about the time denied with Smoke, like if you stack all of his smoke grenades for the longest amount of time possible, how long can you make it to where people can't enter through your smoke? And the answer is 30 seconds, because the smoke lasts 10 seconds each and he has 3 of them, so 30 seconds is the most that you can waste with Smoke. Now, out of all of the entry denial operators, this is the worst. Goyo and Tachanka both have longer effects and more entry denial than Smoke does. And Smoke's entry denial is more effective, though, in my opinion, just because of how cohesive it is with his utility. So if I had to rank Smoke in terms of like solo queue play, and even comp for that matter, I still think he's not last, right? Like he's still a pretty good anchor, but once we go over all of the other entry denial operators, I'll give you a decision based off of the info that I provided with you. Next, we have Goyo. Now, Goyo, he has a canister, he puts it down, and you're able to shoot it whenever you want to. The only downside to this is that attackers can use it to their advantage, But that doesn't happen as often as you think, especially in the higher ranks, and if you're putting these Goyos in a correct position, it's not really an issue. Pair that with the fact that a lot of people are playing Mutant Mozzie right now due to Brava being in the game, it makes it to where you don't really got to worry about Twitch drones destroying your Goyos either, so it's pretty cool to have a Goyo on your team. He also has a 1.5 times scope on his Vector and a 2x on his TCSG, as you can see right here, so he's actually pretty effective in the game right now for solo queue. If we look at also the area denied, like I said, Goyo is first place. He has the biggest area of effect when it comes to his fire, it being 4.05 meters compared to Smoke only being 3.6, so a little bit bigger, but you know, the fact that it lasts really long too definitely makes it to where the range matters a lot. So he beats Smoke and Tachanka for that matter in that aspect. Now, unlike Smoke, it doesn't actually affect vision, it's just fire and it's on the ground, meaning that you can't use it as a smoke grenade like Smoke, so that's one downside to Goyo, but not that much of a downside. And the cool thing about Goyo, like I said, is you deploy his gadget in the prep phase, meaning that your teammates can use your gadget, and it's not only up to you to use the gadget, it also means that you can place down your utility and play however you want. You can play in sight, you can play near sight, you can roam, it doesn't matter. You can die and you will still get usefulness out of your utility if your teammates are good. So if we're talking about solo queue, he's probably the most reliable you can get in terms of an area denial operator compared to Smoke and Tachanka, because you don't even need to be alive to have his utility be effective. You don't even need to be on site. You can do literally whatever you want and still get value out of him because your teammates can use your gadget, which is really powerful and arguably one of the best reasons why Goyo is even comparable to Tachanka and Smoke on this list. Now, the one downside to Goyo is you have to be in a line of sight with your Goyos for them to actually be effective, which means that you can't throw them from behind a deployable shield, you can't activate it from a remote location, you have to put yourself in danger for even just a millisecond to be able to activate his gadget, which isn't cool. It also limits it to where you can put the gadget, because if you need to have line of sight to be able to shoot the Goyo canister for it to pop out fire, that means that you can only put it in so many places that are safe for you to shoot. So that is a pretty big downside if I'm being honest, but as long as you're placing them in places to where you can shoot them and they can't shoot them on the attacking side, then it's not that big of an issue. Another cool thing about Goyo canisters is the majority of the Goyo canister is actually bulletproof, except for the part, of course, that you would shoot to explode it, meaning that you can block drone holes, you can place it in certain positions to where the attackers can't shoot it from their point of view, but you can shoot it from yours, which is again pretty powerful, right? Like, if you're talking about Goyo's downside being that attackers can use his gadget, that's only if you're not good at placing the Goyo canisters down, or you're not good at protecting it from Twitch drones, right? So at a certain point, it's like he doesn't really have that many downsides, which again is cool because you have your weapon equipped whenever you're using his gadget, so it makes it even safer to play Goyo because you don't have to worry about switching to your gadget or switching to a launcher like you would with Tachanka and not having your gun out when it's a crucial moment. And people are like, well, that doesn't happen that often. It happens very often, especially with Tachanka. People will run at me if they know I have my launcher out. It happens all the time. I actually bait people into running at me because I'll launcher and I'll put my gun up because I know people will push me if I have my launcher out. It's that bad. So it actually is a pretty huge advantage to have a Goyo canister that you can shoot and have your gun up with without having to pull out a launcher or a smoke grenade to be able to use the ability. So I think it's personally pretty good. Another cool thing that Goyo has on these other two operators is that he's a 2-speed, 2 health, while the other two are 3 armor and 1 health, which has its ups and downs. I honestly prefer being a 3 armor than a 3-speed because if I'm sitting on site, I don't need the speed anyway, and the extra armor does help. So it's kind of pick your poison there, but if you like to run around, Goyo is pretty good at that because again, you pre-place his utility, but he's also a 2-speed, so that's pretty cool as well. Now, if we talk about per Goyo canister, like the amount of time that each piece of utility wastes, Goyo of course has the most, right? You're talking 20 seconds per Goyo canister and he has 4 of them, which is pretty cool. But if we look at the total time of all 4 canisters combined compared to the 2 other entry denial operators, he's actually second place. He only wastes 80 seconds, Smoke wastes 30, but Tachanka wastes a lot more than that, and I'll get into that very shortly when I go over Tachanka. Speaking of, let's just go over Tachanka. First of all, he has the least amount of area denied. That means that his fire takes up the least amount of space, which is bad because a lot of the times people will just run through your fire and push you, right? And that's especially bad because you have a launcher out a lot. So that comes into baiting your launcher, which has a pretty high skill ceiling. Now, the one thing I want to talk about as well is that launcher, which has a high skill ceiling in and of itself because the grenades launch so far and so fast, and they don't explode on impact, they bounce, right? So you have to learn lineups, you have to learn generally just how to shoot your grenades effectively, you have to know how they bounce, like angles and stuff like that. So that has its ups and downs. What's really cool is you can actually like launch these Tachanka things off of the roof and down so that you can just stay behind a deployable shield and you can launch it off walls multiple times and kind of bounce them around. So you don't actually need to peek off of the shield compared to Goyo and Smoke where you have to peek off of the shield to use their utility, even if it's just for a millisecond to shoot the canister or to throw the grenade. With Tachanka, you don't have to do that. you can just bounce his grenades, which is pretty cool, but it's very hard to learn. So Tachanka is an operator that's very, very hard to learn, but once you master him, he becomes extremely effective, and he has a very high skill ceiling, at least compared to Smoke and Goyo. So that's a pretty cool thing about Tachanka. Again, downside that he has is that he doesn't actually obstruct vision like Smoke does, and then also he has a launcher, which is a pretty bad thing. The fact that you have to pull out something just to shoot fire and you don't have your gun up is very, very, very bad, and it's one of the many reasons that Grim is so bad, and other operators as well, right? So not good that he has a launcher at all by any means. Now, if we talk about the actual range of the gadget, how far you can shoot it, he has the best range by far. He has a very, very long range. You can shoot these things across maps, and the fact that they bounce makes it to where you can shoot them even further. So that's pretty cool. He does have the most range out of anybody. Now, getting into the actual amount of area that Tachanka can deny, we're talking 20 of his launchers, each wasting 7 seconds. So if you do the math, that is 140 seconds of time that he can waste with all of his fire launchers. Now, granted, you're not going to use most of them all the time, and that's only if they're pushing one side, and Tachanka's best use is the fact that you can launch multiple fire at once. So realistically, you're not going to get all of those seconds out of Tachanka, but in a perfect world, which is what I've given to Smoke and Goyo, he can waste 140 seconds of time, which is a little under double what Goyo can get, and a lot more than Smoke can get. So he has the most amount of time that can be wasted. He also has the most amount of entry denial because he has 20 grenades, which means he can waste a lot of time, a lot more, meaning what you can do with Tachanka is you can waste time early round, you can waste time mid round, and you can waste time late round. With Goyo, you're really only wasting time late round, and with Smoke, you're really only wasting time early round to delay the initial push, unless you're playing him for the late round like most people do in the lower ranks. So with Tachanka, you don't gotta worry about what time it is, you just fucking shoot fire. That's all you gotta do. That's all you gotta think about. You just boonk, boonk, boom. That's all you gotta do. Pretty simple. And he wastes the most time. So that's pretty cool. Now, I will say a huge advantage that Tachanka has on both of the operators compared to him is the fact that his gun not only has a 1.5 times scope, which last video we talked about is the most game-breaking scope and the best scope in the entire game, but he also has a 2x scope, which is really cool. Goyo does have a 2x scope, but only on his TCSG, and he has a 1.5 times scope on his Vector. So I can't actually say that both of them don't have these scopes, but Tachanka has it on an SMG with 0 recoil and an extended barrel with 30 bullets. So I think that's extremely powerful. Paired with the Bearing 9 and the amount of fire that he brings and the deployable shield, I feel like in terms of the actual utility, he definitely wins the category, probably excluding Smoke because Smoke does bring a shotgun for sight setup, right? But that 2x on his SMG is fucking wild. If you go to any streamer like Bolo right now, I guarantee you he's playing Tachanka on defense. I've seen him upload like 3 Tachanka videos just this week. Like, it's absolutely crazy because Tachanka is very, very good for solo queue. He's very, very fun, and the 2x makes it to where like you can bear with the fact that it's hard to play him. And once you learn how to play him, I honestly think he's one of the most effective entry denial operators in the entire game. Like, I think he's that good. So knowing all 3 of these operators and their utility, what they bring, the pros and cons of each, I'm gonna give you a final decision of who I think the best entry denial operator is in solo queue and who I think the best entry denial operator is in competitive play. I know I have a lot of people that play competitive that are like scrimming, T4, T3, whatever, that watch my videos, so it actually is a different answer. If we're talking about solo queue ranked, you have no teammates, you are by yourself, the best entry denial operator, in my opinion, is Tachanka with a 2nd place in Goyo and a 3rd place in Smoke. I know that's controversial, but I want you to hear me out, okay? 2x scope, 1.5 times scope on Tachanka. Tachanka can also waste fire all throughout the round. Like, it doesn't matter when you have to use it. You don't have to think about when. You don't have to think about sparing utility. You can use it all throughout the round. So it requires very little brain. And the more you learn him, the better you're going to be at him. So you can be at Tachanka one trick and it actually be extremely viable. Now, if he didn't have the 2x and the 1.5, he would be last place for me. 0 question. Not only that, but they buffed his gadget and he has a deployable shield. So I feel like he's pretty fucking good right now. And that's why everyone is playing him. His pick rate has just soared, especially compared to Smoke and Goyo. Now, the reason that I put Goyo above Smoke is pretty much just his 1.5 times scope and the fact that Goyo, for solo queue specifically, you don't need to be alive or to play off of your canisters with Goyo compared to Smoke, right? Smoke, I think, is really, really effective, but I think he shines most when he's played by a very good player and he's played with a team, right? I think that's when Smoke shines the most personally, which doesn't happen a lot, especially because the majority of the player base is silver and they're solo queuing. I don't think that's the case. Now, if you go into higher ranks, right, we're talking plat, emerald, diamond, champ, I do think that Smoke is the best, with a second place in Tachanka and a third place in Goyo. And I think if we're talking about competitive play, it's the exact same thing, right? I think Smoke is first, Tachanka is second, Goyo is third. That is just my personal opinion. If you are a high level player, go off of what I just said. If you are beginner, let's say you're on console, let's say you're a very low rank, let's say you're a very bad player, play Tachanka, then play Goyo, then play Smoke, because Smoke is arguably the hardest one to learn out of all of them. I think that's my opinion. If you disagree with me, let me know down in the comments below and why, and who knows, you might change my mind. While you're down there too, go ahead and like the video if you liked it. If you watched this far, you obviously liked it. Sub to the channel down below as well. I upload 3 times a week. I upload shorts all the time as well. My name's Alka, and I will see you on the next video. Later.